Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Aftershow today. And I say this all the time. I'm extra excited today. I have been chomping at the bit to talk to this individual we have here today on the Aftershow about this particular movie. It is indeed Halloween Ends, or so they say. Does it end? Does it not? We'll be diving into all that, as well as we're having a spoiler-filled discussion. So be warned right now, hit pause. If you haven't seen Halloween Ends, go see it, come back. Unless you like spoilers, then just chat with us.
Come and get me, mother.
But we're going to be deep diving into all the details of the film. We're going to be talking about the questions left behind and can it go anywhere from here? Should it go anywhere from here? I'll tell you who I'm thrilled to be talking to today. He is the undisputed favorite guest of mine on Aftershow. It is the one and only pierogi-eating Halloween aficionado from Heroes Reforged, Adam Vlavic. How are you?
I am great. I'm super excited to talk about this movie. This is actually going to be the first show I've actually talked about this outside of like tweeting about the movie. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Halloween Ends cherry right here, right now.
Exactly.
That makes me so excited. I actually was stalking you a little bit on Instagram to sort of get your thoughts on it. I always like to sort of have a gauge, but maybe it's better that I didn't see you post anything about it. So I'm so excited to dive into this film. Let's first check in with the tomato meter score. It is 40% on this film. The audience score 57%. Directed by David Gordon Green, the third in the trilogy on behalf of David. And here's what the critics' consensus is. Halloween Ends, for now anyway, with a frequently befuddling installment that's stabbed, slashed, and beaten by a series of frustrating missed opportunities. Harsh. That is a harsh reception. What say you? Your general thoughts before we deep dive, Adam.
You know, I watched this movie twice. I watched it at Beyond Fest for the first time. And as the movie was happening, I didn't really know how to feel in the moment because I was kind of expecting something else. And I think that's where a lot of these initial reactions kind of come from. I've since had a chance to watch the movie 2 more times, and I actually enjoy the film. It's not without flaw. I don't think any movie is, regardless of how great even a movie like Halloween, the original, is. But there's definitely things I've come to appreciate about it and some of the swings that they took to try to do something that's not just a rinse and repeat of what they did for the last 2 movies. So I liked it. I don't love it. I like it quite a bit. And I'm excited to dive deeper into it.
I'm excited that you said rinse and repeat because I have an issue with all of the wigs in this film. There were some bad wigs on the part of many different characters. I don't understand it. We're in 2022, people. Or was that supposed to be a throwback? Everybody's hair looked like it was still stuck in 1978. But we'll get into that overall. So I saw this movie at the premiere in Los Angeles. Obviously, huge packed theater, a lot of public as well as people in the business. They sort of, Universal likes to do that with their premieres, mix it up and have, the general audience. So because of that, I think it really made me enjoy the film. I will say, overall, I enjoyed it. Now, a little bird had sort of told me it doesn't go in the direction you think it's going to go. The 2 main characters, the 2 main players that we go and love and come to see in Halloween are a little bit sidelined. It goes in a different direction. So I knew that going into it. So I wasn't surprised by that. I thought they told a good story. Obviously, there was moments where I was watching it. I would say the first, I don't know how many minutes, but up until they're in the club and they're having that kind of like rave moment where the strobe light is going, I was like, oh, I really like this. I like where it's going. And then I felt like I was on a roller coaster of highs and lows for the rest of the film. We'll dive more into it, but let's first talk about the big topic. There's sort of 2 topics, I think. The fact that they did go in a different direction, and then was it a satisfying conclusion? How did you feel about the final showdown? So let's first talk about the elephant in the room, and that is, this is Halloween Ends, 13th film in the franchise, the last outing supposedly for Michael Myers and Laurie Strode, and Grandma and Grandpa were sidelined. First of all, Adam, what was with Michael Myers sort of having a bad back through the whole thing
I know.
and getting slapped around? But the fact that this was Corey's story. This was really the story of this boy, Corey. And it's been very divisive, I think, in terms of commentary I've seen so far. So how did you feel about that fact that they really took it into a different direction? Do you think Jamie Lee Curtis was just like, I'll come back one more time, but like, I don't want to do a lot of action. I just like, I'll show up, like, cause she really has a lot to say.
Yeah, and I think the only way that this new trilogy would have even happened was if Jamie Lee Curtis was allowed to have a lot of creative input on the movies. Because the last time she did it and they quote unquote killed Michael Myers, they didn't. So I feel like her contribution, a lot of things, but I think a lot of it also was, if we're going to do this again, it has to be finite. There has to be an ending. I want Laurie's story to kind of close off and wrap up, and whatever happens at the end, whether I die or Michael Myers dies or whatever the case may be, I want there to be like conclusion. So I feel like with this film, especially with a character like Corey, well, first of all, I'm pretty familiar with John Carpenter's filmography. Mm-hmm. So I've seen the movie Christine, and this movie borrows heavily from the film Christine, which is originally a Stephen King book. So as soon as the movie started kind of going and I started to see, okay, this character's name is Corey Cunningham. The character in Christine is Archie Cunningham. He works at a junkyard. Archie Cunningham restores his car also at sort of like a junkyard car auto repair shop. So I'm like, okay, I see what David Gordon Green is trying to do. He's trying to use Michael Myers, no pun intended, as the vehicle to sort of establish a new character to, I think, talk more about not necessarily Laurie and Michael's story, but to talk about the concept of evil in this universe, the transference of evil, how literally on the nose they are in the movie where they say evil can change shape and can change form. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to go. And it's not really that unique for Halloween to kind of go in a different direction when they do sometimes a sequel. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch completely eliminates Michael Myers. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 goes in a very unique direction where it tries to dive into the backstory of Michael Myers. So it's a swerve, but I guess for me, because I've been with the Halloween franchise for this long, it's not the biggest swerve in the world. And again, like I said earlier, it kind of, I understand sidelining, especially Michael Myers, like we don't see him until 40 minutes into the movie. But it kind of makes sense. In the last film, he got shot and stabbed so many times by so many different characters, including so many people in Haddonfield. And I think the idea of Michael Myers being this supernatural entity that is basically in the shape of a man, I think there's something interesting to dissect there about, can this evil basically transfer itself into another body, influence another body to kind of take over and become the new version of the shape, which is why I feel like the movies did one thing really well, where he's referred to by some people as Michael Myers, but he's also referred to by many people just as the shape, because he literally, he's not a human. He's not a character, really. He is just this like physical force that moves across Haddonfield and just murders people. So I think that's where part of the sort of the discussion is between fans. They just want to see Michael Myers going around Haddonfield killing people. And I think that's valid and fair. But I also feel like we have 12 other movies, or I guess 11 if you eliminate Halloween 3, that have already done that. And I still feel like at the end, it gives you a satisfying concluding ending. You still see Laurie and Michael face off. You see how evil, despite her trying to escape it, it always sort of sucks itself back into her life, and she has to face it. And in this film, she has to face it, and with Allison's help, they end it permanently, forever, until they reboot it again. So I was really into like how they were trying to play with those concepts and those ideas. Does it fire on all cylinders? Not necessarily. Do I think maybe COVID and the pandemic had an influence on how the story maybe changed a little bit? For sure. Like they were going to shoot these movies back to back or simultaneously. I don't remember exactly. And then they didn't. And I'm sure that the script probably changed, because if you watch Halloween Kills, it ends in a place where you think it's going to pick right back up after what happened in that film? And now there's an alternate ending that really sells that. So I think some things changed, but I like the idea of the movie talking about something more than just Michael goes from door to kill people. It's not as interesting if they would have done that, in my opinion.
Okay, so much to unpack about what you just said. The thing that I want to sort of jump on what you said about evil shaping other people and maybe influencing other people. I didn't get that connection in this film. I don't think that was established enough. I felt like he and Corey looked at each other in the cave for that first time and he saw that flash of what Corey had and let him live. Mm-hmm. But I didn't get that he was influencing Corey. I didn't really get I don't think the Corey character was 100%, and maybe I wasn't meant to. I didn't understand whether I was supposed to root for him or not. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand whether this was supposed to be a statement on bullying, mental illness, a lot of things that we talk about, domestic violence, because obviously his mother abused him. There were so many things that were coming and going with the Corey character that in the very beginning, when he was the quote unquote nerdy kid that, that the granddaughter loved, that Andy's character loved and was attracted to that nerdy aspect of him. And that made sense to me because she's been through so much. She lost her parents. But then, he goes down that tangent where I'm calling it like Jason Patric in The Lost Boys. I don't know if he watched that film before he acted in this film, but he totally all of a sudden became this like baddie that kept like, he was on the bike and she was holding him and they were like, he was given those looks. And I was like, is he just like, he's not, I'm sorry, like, sorry to the actor, but I don't think he is that type of guy that's going to have a girl be like, ooh, I love that bad boy aspect. He's not Jason Patric. I'm so sorry, but that didn't work for me. That's where I started to laugh a little bit, where I was like, and then when they had their weird makeouts, it was just like the whole thing was like, ooh, like I go back to the Halloweens of the 70s and there's some hot scenes in there. There's a lot of mustaches, but there's some hot scenes back in the 70s. That creeped me out a little bit. But in terms of what the overall elephant in the room, that they took it in a different direction, I would have been totally fine with it if it was the second installment of the trilogy. I feel like this film should have been the second installment. I didn't care for Halloween Kills as much as I cared for the first and the third, to be honest. I didn't like the sort of flash mob aspect of the whole thing, the whole town. That one, I felt like I could have done without. I felt like this could have been an interesting second entry. And then this past entry, I understand what you're saying about like, we've seen them go back and forth, but I feel like the final showdown, and we'll get into it more, was again in a kitchen. It was kind of a retread a little bit of the last film. I would have loved for this entry to have seen a Quiet Place type film, where it's a cat and mouse and there's tension the entire film and it's just Michael and it's just Laurie, and it didn't have to be an all-out fight, but where you build that tension and it has to be done right. And if you don't do that right, because that's very much directing, it could have been like a disaster where you're either bored or whatever. It would have to be done so well. But I would have liked them to sort of explore more of that in the last film. So I guess I'm a little bit more, I wanted that a little bit more of that traditional ending. So I told you a little bit of how I felt about Rowan Campbell, who played Corey, but what did you think of his performance and how he fit in the story? And the fact that we spent so much time, he was almost in every shot. And personally, by the end, I was like, I've seen enough.
Yeah.
I've seen enough.
In terms of the performance, I mean, I truthfully, like, I don't know that actor's work outside of this movie, so I don't really have anything to kind of judge it against, but it's always tough, right? Because you look at the story and you look at this, well, you don't physically look at the script, but you're experiencing the movie and you're trying to kind of understand, like, what is David Gordon Green asking of this actor? And, you brought up Lost Boys, and I'm sure that he probably watched stuff like Lost Boys. He probably saw something like watched Christine to try to see like what David Gordon Green was aiming for. So I definitely feel like that will automatically sort of influence what you're going to do in the film, along with what the script is actually asking you to do. So I think there's like moments where I'm intrigued by the performance and intrigued by what he's doing and the choices that they're having the character make. But there definitely are moments in the movie where I'm like, I don't know if I buy it so much. Like, he seems to be, when he first meets Michael Myers, he seems to be a little bit fearful, which I totally understand. But then, I don't know, 15 minutes after that, he goes into the cave to wrestle Michael Myers to get his mask off. I think that scene is hilarious. Like watching Michael Myers wrestle with some kid is hilarious to me.
I
But
know.
I'm like, I don't know how much I buy, that Corey has the sort of strength and courage to do that when in like one or two scenes before, he seems very apprehensive and scared and, all these things. So I think maybe the progression and the arc that the character makes, it kind of gets shortcutted a little bit for us to kind of just get the story going. I'll take even what you said a step further about this being a second movie. I honestly feel like all three of these Halloween movies could have just been two films, if I'm being totally honest. Like, I think the 2018 movie and Halloween Kills could have been compressed into one movie. Right. And I think you could have introduced Corey Cunningham in the 2018 film as one of Allison's classmates. And you still could have had the events that happened to him happen and maybe just build him out a little bit more. And I would have, honestly, the route I would have gone, I would have made him a similar character to what Paul Rudd was in Halloween 6, because he plays Tommy Doyle, which is the little boy that Laurie babysits in the original Halloween film, and he kind of becomes obsessed with Michael Myers and the whole Laurie Strode case. I feel like if you would have done something like that with Corey, where he's a little bit obsessive about Michael Myers and Laurie Strode and the whole case, and then at the same time he accidentally is responsible for killing somebody, and then having those parallel paths for him and Michael, and then them meeting together, then I think you probably could have been able to sell it more. But I think that's the unfortunate sort of outcome of being really excited to make one movie and then deciding after the fact, well, let's make two more. Let's just make a trilogy. That's part of my problem with a lot of these legacy franchises is they don't necessarily think about, well, if we did a whole trilogy, what could we do? How could we evolve it? What characters could we introduce? So, yeah. But in terms of the character Corey, I do agree that I think maybe it would have been better suited to introduce him earlier in a previous film to then sort of get the ball rolling. So when we get to his arc in this film, it's a character, okay, we've lived with him for a little bit. But I guess I guess for me, I'm more open, not more open. I guess I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt if they can really kind of convince me that it works. And it works in varying degrees for me. Some of it I think does work, and some of it I'm like, this doesn't feel fully sort of realized for me.
I feel, and I'm being hard on the actor because we don't know how much of that was direction, and he was given a lot to do. And I looked up his credits, and I think he's done, a lot of series. This is a lot for someone to take over and be in almost every scene. Like he was in so many scenes, which leads me to the big question, and that's something I've been pondering. And because we have Peacock TV and we can rewatch the movie, I rewatched this scene a couple of times, and that was the opener that I thought was the best scene in the movie. And I thought it was a great opener, and the kid going down the stairs. And of course it was a callback to so many Halloween. And it was a crazy, and I really liked the kid. I mean, he was a brat, and this was the moment that and this is why I struggle with whether or not to root for this character. Because as he's kicking in the door, why was he kicking in the door? Why was he getting so, I understand being a little freaked out, but it was almost like, and tell me your take on it. I'm like, did he already have a little evil in him? And that's why he was kicking the door. And then when he shouts, I'm going to kill you. Like, that could be a phrase that people say sometimes, like, oh, I'm going to kill you, or was he really like, there was something taking over in his body? Was there evil in him? Or because I think we're meant to feel sort of sorry for him that it was an accident in the beginning, or was it an accident? Like, what was your take on that?
Yeah, I think for me, and it's a little tough because going into the movie, I kind of knew a little bit of what the direction was going to be. But the way I look at it is like this. When Michael Myers is first introduced in the first Halloween movie, he kills for the sake of killing. Like, he's a little 6-year-old kid. He walks in the kitchen. He waits for his parents to be gone. He waits for his girlfriend's boyfriend to be gone, walks in the kitchen, grabs the kitchen knife, goes up the stairs, murders his sister. Like, no hesitation, no reluctance, nothing. He just does it. With Corey Cunningham, the way they establish it is it's accidental. You maybe feel a little empathetic towards the character, and then it's the influence that kind of Michael Myers or the situation that he's sort of, been placed into, the bullying and all that stuff, that seems to kind of change him and make him evil. So at the beginning, it really, I feel like it's tough to say whether or not he already had a seed of evil in him. It's very possible that that could be the case, especially if that character had been going through bullying for his entire life. But it's kind of left ambiguous. They don't really establish whether or not that's the case. Like the kid is kind of snarky towards him, but
Yeah.
we've seen kids in other Halloween movies be snarky towards other characters. It doesn't mean that they necessarily turn around and kill those characters. So I think some of that ambiguity it's a little tough to decide whether or not, because for me, going into the movie, I wasn't really empathetic towards the character. And I think part of it is because I knew the path that he was eventually going to end up on. But I think the way the movie plays it, I feel like the movie tries to play like, oh no, this kid has been put into this situation. He's accidentally killed someone. How is this? What kind of effect is this going to have on him in the future of this movie? And I don't know if I'm a viewer going in fresh and not knowing anything about this movie, if I buy it, and if I feel like it's set up strongly enough for me to then accept that he becomes, the next Michael Myers or whatever.
Yeah. And I think I really thought, and I didn't know how the movie was going to end, but even though it was Halloween Ends, I thought, oh, this is what they're going to do. They're going to have him continually get more and more evil, and then he's going to live.
And he'll become
Allison's
Michael Myers.
Yes, exactly. Speaking of Allison, what did you think? That relationship cringed me out. And I thought it discredited her, because in the last installment, you really set up this 3 generation of strong, incredible women. And I love that idea. But then you dumbed her down to the point where, like, I'm sorry, by a 2022 lens, she's not falling for this guy. And when he all of a sudden, maybe in the beginning, but when he all of a sudden goes to her, I killed somebody. And then the next shot is her like holding him on the back of my motorcycle. And all of a sudden embracing this bad boy side of him, like, it discredited her as a character. I thought it didn't make sense to me that she was still like that. She's not questioning, hey, I like the nerdy guy. What happened to that guy? Like, he's become kind of a dick. Like, what's going on with you, dude?
I think that's massively amplified. And again, going back to some of my things that I'm like not super 100% on board with this movie is at the end, not to jump ahead or anything, when Allison walks in on Laurie and Corey, I looked at that scene, I was like, this feels a little flawed to me, because not only does he walk in there, not only does it seem so out of left field for Laurie to actually commit a murder against this person, isn't that Michael Myers mask literally right next to him? Wouldn't you see that and go, well, it's my grandmother. If someone walked into her house dressed up as Michael Myers, of course she's going to defend herself. So I feel like that character is written very unevenly throughout the movie. Yes. I think in the beginning portion where she maybe feels something towards him because of her experience, and I think there's like a little bit of a relatability between those two characters where she looks at him and goes, I can kind of understand what you're going through, obviously, because I've dealt with Michael Myers. I've dealt with the murder of my entire family. So I think in the beginning, it kind of does work. I do think it's a little bit too fast where she's like, well, we should hang out sometime. I'm like, you don't even know this kid. And so I do think that part of that sort of story element of Allison, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this. I feel like, in the first movie, we kind of establish that she is someone who's just trying to move past the family trauma and not even think about it, but she's still empathetic towards her grandmother. The second movie, it's a direct continuation, so it's basically the same type of character. In this third film, I'm like, you seem to be really going against Laurie, which kind of feels so oddly placed. Like, I feel like if they had a scene, and they do have one, but I feel like if they had one scene where they really kind of sat down to kind of really discuss Corey's character, the arc, the path he's going on, the way that they do in the movie, it's really just like a shouting contest between two characters for one scene, and then she goes off and she leaves. And I'm like, this doesn't feel like what I would imagine Allison would do as a character based on how she's set up in the previous two films. So yeah, there's like, and I don't think it's a performance thing either. Like, I think Andy Matichik is great. I literally just think it really just comes down to the way it's written in the script. And I think it's interesting that the way that a lot of the movie was written, it has 4 writers on it. And sometimes they
Mhm.
would get to a point where they could either decide to go one of 4 different ways, and every writer would write their own outcome, and then they would shop all those ideas and come to one conclusion. I'm like, maybe that's why some of the things that I don't think work are sort of like the I don't know. I feel like that's sort of the reason why, is because that they shop just maybe too many ideas. Like, I feel like they should have just chose, this is going to be Allison's path. This is where she's going to go. This is where we want her to end up. And then really look back at, like, how did we establish that and what feels like the most natural progression? Because yeah, there's definitely moments with Corey where I'm like, all right, if this was really through a 2022 lens,
Yeah.
Allison in no way would be like, I'm going to go on the roof with this weird dude. Oh, he's jumping off the
Yeah.
roof. He's being creepy. He's doing kind of like, I'm like,
Right.
nah,
I'm
I don't know about that.
attracted. I'm attracted because I'm damaged.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
think they could have leaned more into the trauma of losing her parents, that she sort of has that
Yeah.
generational trauma that Lori has, but that really bonded the two of them. I think maybe too, it would have been more fun if he didn't show his hand to Laurie Strode and to her either, that he still remained that kind of innocent kid to their faces. But I thought that, the one shot where they had Laurie look at him and she sort of saw the evil that she saw in Michael Myers, that was great. I thought that was great. Like, she's so brilliant, and she's of course brilliant in this. And we'll get into that too, but her writing a memoir and all that, like, I thought that was a great moment. But it would have been fun if they played with that a little bit more as the film went on, where she kept sort of suspecting him. But that moment where he says, if I can't have her, nobody will. I would have liked it if he didn't show his hand to everybody, and then there was more of a reveal in the end, or if they didn't show it to the audience and there was a more reveal in the end. But they really, leaned into sort of this like protege idea with him and Michael Myers. And that leads me to like those scenes in the cave where he's kind of slapping Michael around. I was laughing at that. Like, Michael was like obviously a bit like worn down in this film. He didn't have as much power as he used to have. And I guess did he transfer it over? Like, what was going on that he'd slap him around? And like, to see this character that you talked about earlier, like, he can't be killed. He's larger than life. Evil can't be killed. He's not human. And he's sort of standing there in the cave, and the kid's like, psh, psh, and he's just like,
yeah. Yeah, and I think that goes back to sort of like, sometimes part of the script, it's like too ambiguous. And I think at the end of Halloween Kills, Laurie starts to talk about the more he kills, the more he transcends. Okay, let's explore that a little bit. What does that mean in this version of the timeline? What does it mean the more that he kills, the more he, what is he becoming? Is he just becoming a literal embodiment of evil with 0% human, any sort of human emotion or anything? And then with this movie, I think part of the issue with this film is that they set it 4 years later. I think if they would have said it 1 year later, I think you'd have a lot less of these sorts of questions, because, you're compressing for Michael Myers to be under Haddonfield in the sewer system for 4 years. I'm like, okay, eventually those wounds are going to heal. He's been through much worse and he survived. I don't know. Like, the 4 year time gap to me is a little strange. But regardless, I think that maybe they could have spent a little bit more work trying to maybe explain, either through Laurie. I mean, really, Laurie's the only character who kind of could do it, and trying to really help establish to the audience, well, what does it mean when we talk about Michael Myers transcending? What is he like?
Yeah.
What is he becoming? Is it literally just like, I think of something like The Thing, where it's this alien species that takes the form of a man, but is really this like incredibly terrifying alien being. Is that what Michael's turning into? Or is he just a shell of a man that is just an engine for evil? How do you sort of explain that to the audience? Because then you see him in the cave with Corey, and he definitely is weaker, but then he kills someone and it kind of rejuvenates some of his power. Is that how he works? He's like a battery that the more he kills, it recharges him. It's really kind of left ambiguous, and it's part of my frustration with some of the choices they made was, I feel like if you would have spent a little bit more time maybe establishing what those rules were, then maybe I think most people would be like, okay, I get it. If he isn't constantly killing, then, and I think that's something you would have had to have done in the 2018 film, because he's been in prison for 40 years. It means he hasn't killed anybody for that long. So maybe if you could have worked that in of like, well, he's getting old and he's struggling, but the moment he starts killing, he's powering back up essentially. So I think there's a little bit of this like gray area that if you're a fan of Halloween, maybe you can kind of fill in the blanks with the other backstories that they've given you in the past. It's kind of a cheat code, because I feel like if you're going to make a completely new timeline, you have to set the rules for what's happening. So it's kind of hit and miss with me sometimes with what they do with Michael and how little he is in the movie and what he does in the movie.
What they did do in this movie, which I thought was great, was some pretty terrifying kills.
Yes.
Like, I'm not good with that stuff, and I did have to look away quite often. I'm sure you zoomed in. I'm sure you replayed. Yeah, there are some great, I mean, personally, my favorite was the doctor and was she the nurse? Yeah, was she a nurse, or did she just work there as an administrative whatever? But yeah, the fact that they were having this affair and she was like, you know, he was such a creepola because she was, not that there's anything wrong with an age gap, but she was significantly younger, and they really played that off well, those sort of stereotypes of these men who are like thinking they're all whatever, feeling their mojo because they're dating this young hot, you know, thing. And I thought that was the double teaming was a little weird, but you know, between the two of them getting together and like, let's double team it. But like, that was weird, but I thought the visuals were cool. Using the word favorite kill makes me feel really like twisted and evil, but I thought it was my favorite.
I've been doing it for 30 years. Leaning
into my dark side. So what did you think about the kills?
Michael Myers going with a classic pin to the wall. You love to see it. Just taking that 12-inch kitchen knife and just going straight forward. You're like, great. We make the joke. We make the joke when we watch these movies. We talk about like the greats. We talk about Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, Michael Phelps, Michael Myers coming in with a classic maneuver. Honestly, I think my favorite kill in the movie is Corey killing the DJ at the radio station. First of all, smashing his head into all the audio equipment and then cutting his tongue off with a pair of scissors because he hates his voice that much, which I'm like, that's great. I mean, he did call you an ugly mother effer the moment that he saw you. I get it. You got a little bit of revenge for that one. So I think that might have been outside of something that I'm sure we'll talk about. I think that probably was my favorite one, because you think it's over and then all of a sudden you see this pair of scissors come in and you're like, oh no. I did love that one. That one was pretty great.
That one was the one I had to look away the most. That was the one that I was like, okay, this is, but my heart broke for him a little bit too. Because I think the first time, like when he kills the homeless man, that was when, like, the first kill was sort of accidental. And then when you realize, oh no, like that's the moment that he's broken now. He can't go back. He's gone to the other side because that was intentional. But yeah, then to sort of see him, you know, I will say this about this actor. I do think about him a lot. I've thought about him a lot since I saw this movie. So maybe that means you
just see his face and put it on your brain. You're like, oh no.
It's between like, yeah, it's the makeout face that I could do without haunting my nightmares. Maybe that's just as a female. I'm just like, oh, don't ever come at a woman with that face.
Yeah. See, and this is where my horror brain kicks in, because I'm like, I don't even remember what he looked like when he kissed that girl.
You're focused on the kills.
Yeah,
I was focused. Yeah,
exactly.
It was equally as terrifying for people to watch. What other kills or moments in the film did you dig?
I mean, obviously that fight at the end is really great. I mean, having Laurie basically just pin him to the kitchen table and then take the fridge and smash the fridge over Michael Myers. I was like, this is awesome. I love this. And then him basically like ripping his hand out from the knife and being able to live long and prosper for the rest of his living existence. I was like, that's cool too. But yeah, so I think that's the beginning. I think the cold open for the film was for me, it was unexpected. Like I did not know. I knew vague things about the movie, but I didn't know that that's how it was going to start. And I was like, wow, this is a way to get us into the film. This is a really nice way to sell us. So I liked moments like that. And I even liked some of the subtle moments. I mean, I guess they're not played necessarily so subtle, is when you see the influence of Michael on Corey and he's doing things like standing behind the shrub where he's like looking up at the window at Laurie, or when Laurie goes out to look for him and he's like standing right behind her, and then all of a sudden shows up next to her. He's like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." And that's I think the moment for me where I was like, "Oh, Laurie can now see what she sees in Michael." And Jamie Lee Curtis is so great because all she's doing is literally just looking at him as he walks by and starts talking to Allison. She's like, you can see the mental processing she's doing of like, oh no, we're not on a good path here. So I like those types of moments where it's just kind of mostly done through visual language and not so much necessarily telling us. I enjoyed that stuff for sure.
Well, I think that's, and when I look back over the franchise, and I watched a bunch of them, rewatched a bunch of them on the weekend, the simplicity and those, and and having
some
those quiet,
some
of them are very rough. There were some really good fun ones too, but even the cheesy ones, the Tyra Banks one was really so cheesy. I had to shut it off, but I was like, okay, we'll watch a different one. But you know, good effort, A for effort. I lost my train of thought, but no, I think the ones that I clue into the most, and that's, you know, great horror, and that's why the first one will always be the greatest, undisputed champion, is because how much time it spent building suspense, how much time it spent on the quieter moments, how much time it spent allowing you to love the characters. I mean, you go back to the very first one, and there really is just something so special about Jamie Lee Curtis in this role and every nuance. And it was very satisfying in this film for me to see that they allowed her to act. They really did allow her to act and then tell her story literally as her memoir. But even down to the very last moment where she gets her romance on, you know, how about those cherry blossoms? Like, I was like, wow, like there really is a reason why Jamie Lee Curtis is the queen, because she did a great job. And that moment, like you said, you were talking about where she sees the Michael Myers, stood out for me. I love too the kitchen scene. I thought they did a great job. And I guess a part of me wanted it to be more drawn out. And maybe, like I said, if they had done like a Quiet Place kind of thing, maybe you could have explored a film where you do see where while they have this cat and mouse, who's going to kill who in the end, and you really don't know what's going to happen in the end. Some of his sort of otherworldliness, or the fact that you can't kill him, or what he is, gets explained throughout, and that is her challenge, as to how is she going to overcome. Because in the past, we've seen her just try to shoot him more times, or stab him more times, or do, like, maybe there's other things they could have explored. That said, the kitchen scene I thought was great. When she put his hand, I thought the quintessential moment was when she put the knife through his hand. That was when my crowd erupted. And the fridge, and there's something very satisfying about when she gets physical. And that's something that you wanted to, from the 2018 film, when she has her house and she's ready and she's got the gun and you see how she's evolved over the years. Like that, I think there's something very satisfying about physically seeing her fully go for it. And I think maybe, of course, I would have wanted to see more of it, but maybe, you know, maybe it wouldn't have worked. I don't know. For what that scene was, it 100% worked as an ending. And the grinder at the end, fabulous choice in the junkyard. Did you enjoy it? Yeah, chef's freaking yes.
Well, I know for years, and this is what I've heard from Jamie Lee Curtis has actually told this story at a convention. In Halloween H2O, she kept wanting to end the story. And apparently there was a clause in the script from Mustafa Akkad, who was the original rights owner. It's now his son now has it, that they could not kill Michael Myers, which is why she ends up having to come back, and then they kill her character, and it ruins the whole thing.
That was
whatever. So I was kind of waiting for the moment of like, okay, either this clause is going to completely like hinder them from killing Michael Myers in this movie, or they're going to kill both of these characters, or they will finally let Laurie kill Michael and he'll be dead forever. So it was really satisfying for her to, first of all, slit his throat, then to cut his arm, basically bleeding out to death, have the procession, and then take him to the grinder and fully commit it. And not only do they commit it, they show it, which I feel like in so many horror movies, they get away with being like, we'll leave it ambiguous. We won't see it from the other angle. We'll just see Laurie looking at it, but we won't actually show Michael being, you know, completely destroyed by this machine. No, they commit and they show it. And it's like, yes, this is 100% done. It's over. It's ended. This timeline, this storyline with these two characters is over with, which I'm like, good. fine. I'm totally happy with that. I don't feel like the timeline needs to run forever, and I think that's something that they did in the previous versions where they let the timeline just go and go and go. I like it having a conclusion. I like it having finality. And I like the idea that now they are forced to come up with something new and different. And I don't want to see them rebooting Halloween. Like, do something else, do something different with it. So I like the fact that it commits to killing Michael Myers and just finally ending that story. And hopefully, it would have been cool to get a post-credit scene where you see her and Frank in Japan, walking around. There's cherry blossoms all over. I'm like, give me that ending. I would have loved to seen that. We don't get it, but whatever. As long as Laurie Strode, our final girl, gets some sort of a happy ending, I'm great. I'm great with it.
Okay, so you were cool with it because I've heard people say like, "Oh my God, I thought she was going to die." I think and I thought maybe just knowing a little bit of Jamie Lee Curtis's mentality, that maybe she would have wanted that for her character. That's why I was kind of surprised. I thought maybe she wouldn't live in the end, that would be something that she would insist on. Actors love a dramatic ending. I'm just saying. And we want them to live, but they always want to kill themselves off when they play these iconic characters. Hello, Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
And it makes me so mad. It's like, don't you realize? So I was thrilled that she lived in the end. But what would you say to those people that would say, oh, the final confrontation wasn't enough, or it was a little anticlimactic? Because that's what some people are saying about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because, again, in a perfect world, I think this whole trilogy could have been 2 really good movies, and I think you could have spent more time building towards that sort of ending, that climactic ending where they do fight. Also, there's another part of me that's like, I understand, because Jamie Lee Curtis's whole thing for that final fight was like, make it look as real as possible. I don't want to do a Hollywood fight. I want it to look like, 2 people in their 60s who are just going at it, who have no real fighting experience. Like you were talking about watching the movie Tyra Banks, Busta Rhymes literally karate kicks the out of Michael Myers in that movie. And I'm like, it's silly and it's fun. But I don't want to see Laurie Strode all of a sudden start doing amazing John Wick moves on Michael Myers or vice versa. That to me is not that exciting. That's why John Wick movies exist. So for them to just have a bare knuckle brawl in the kitchen, I'm like, yeah, that's how that would go down. Especially because of, they're older. We don't have to skirt around that. They're older characters now. They're in their 60s. They're not going to go for that long. They're not going to go 15 rounds. They're not both Rocky Balboa. So I think it worked in the context of what they were building out. And, he is very much an injured, he's very much on the very last leg of his life. She has not been training to sort of encounter Michael Myers again for the last 4 years or so. So I think Jamie Lee Curtis' sort of intuition of let's make it as dirty and as much of a street brawl as possible. And, she does a lot of her own stunts in that fight, maybe all of them. And I think that to me is kind of more important, that it feels like it really is Laurie and Michael going at it and not, stunt doubles being thrown around all over the place.
Right.
I think that works for certain movies just fine. But I think for this movie and this ending, I like it that it feels just so personal. And as far as I've heard, there apparently is going to be an extended cut of the movie. So I'm sure there is more material that we will see from that brawl at the end, which I welcome it. Bring it on.
I didn't feel like the granddaughter coming in to sort of help, and I get the assist. I get that it's sort of their bonding moment, but I almost didn't need it. I would have been fine if Jamie had done it all on her own.
For sure.
Because the fact that they were so torn throughout the movie, I didn't feel like it was earned. And that was it wasn't the actress's fault. It was just that the writing wasn't there because, she kind of deserted her grandmother, wanted to get out of town.
Right.
Didn't want to be around her anymore for this guy that she barely knew. So then her coming in at the end, although I understand why they wanted to do that, I would have, I didn't need that part of it, but sure. I love what you're saying because I didn't realize that until you pointed it out. That's what I liked so much about that scene. You could tell it was real. It felt very visceral. It felt like these actors were really doing it and they were really doing their own stunts. And maybe, again, that's why it was shortened because Jamie Lee Curtis was probably like, I can't, if I'm doing my own stunts, I don't know if I want to be doing this for 2 hours of the film. This is a nice scene. We can do this. But beyond that, we should just give a little mention for those Real Housewives fans that might be watching. Kyle Richards as Lindsay. Did you want to see more of her? She always has such a teeny little role. Like I sometimes think maybe they're going to have her, factor into the story a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think Halloween Kills, it was an opportunity to bring back a lot of legacy characters.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really feel like they had any intention of actually building them up to be anything in more sequels. I feel like those were mostly just nods to the fans. Like, I think what they did with them in Kills was great, but I didn't personally go into this movie expecting Lindsay to do more. I just wanted to see her, just so we knew that she was alive, she was okay, she was good. I didn't necessarily need her to be a part of the story. Could she have been sort of the, I don't want to say replacement for Karen because that feels kind of insensitive, but I think she could have been maybe like a little bit of a middleman between Lori and Allison, maybe a bit more, where if Lori and Allison are having these disagreements and they're butting heads, maybe Lindsay could have been the person to be in the middle, be like, look, I'm not taking sides. I understand where you're coming from, but also like, here's where your grandmother's coming from and here's why, and try to understand, given the context of her life, why she's scared for you. And I think that maybe could have been an interesting way to include her character. But just seeing her and knowing that she survives and that she lives on is like good for me. Maybe it would have been nice to have her at the end of the movie or towards the end of the movie. I just don't know how they would have worked that in to just show that, like, she's Lori's friend. She's there for Lori. Lori's there for her. And it's one of those friendships that kind of lives on and survives these movies. But, I'm just glad that she got to be in it.
She is the only one that had good hair in the movie because, she had her team there. She was like, I want to look full Real Housewives. I want to look like I want to look.
Yeah.
I don't want to look like I fit in with the movie necessarily. It stood out to me again, female things that we notice. I was like, oh yeah, she brought her squad in for this. And she's like, I just want to look good. I just want to look good. I'll mention it one more time. The wigs, like even Jamie's wig, I think could have been better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I don't know how many characters in the movie wear a wig, but for sure she does.
Well, Officer Mulaney, who like hits on, Allison.
Yeah.
And then, meets his demise.
Mm-hmm.
That I think was a wig because I looked up the actor. He has totally different hair.
Okay.
Again, it looked very 70s and they aged him. And I was like, ooh, who's this old creeper? Like hitting on her. They didn't seem like they were in the same age bracket. But when I looked up the actor, he's I think he's in his 20s. I mean, I think they're around the same age. I thought he looked older. And maybe it was just the styling of Frank's hair. But if you're going to get your, cherry blossom sexy time on at the end, maybe comb it before you show up.
Get you a comb, sir. Come on now.
Sir, please.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do you think? So let's rank. First, I want to get into your thoughts because I know I want to hear a lot, about your thoughts on some of the other Halloween movies in the franchise. But how would you rank this final trilogy?
I would pretty much rank them, I think, in the order that they came out. To me, 2018 is the closest one to the original, so I would put that in second position. And then I did enjoy Kills, and I think part of it is also because I think Kills works better as a double feature with Halloween 2018. Maybe on its own, it's not the strongest movie, but I kind of have Kills and Ends up slightly like neck and neck. I feel like I'm still kind of deciding where they go, but for now I think it goes 2018 Kills and then Ends.
Yeah, I just have the last two flipped, which I'm sure is not a surprise, but I really thought Ends was, for me personally, worked better than sort of the town thing. That I don't know, maybe it was just like too many characters. There's some
love the concept.
Yeah.
I think the thing that kind of kills it for me is the Evil Dies Tonight chanting. Like that. Yeah. It feels so just lame. I'm not
I
really
feel like
that
it was
into
political. I feel like it was a political statement of what was going on.
Yeah. And it's funny because, that was obviously shot before, or I guess it was shot during COVID. So, yeah. So, but yeah, I feel like it's like, I think all the right ideas are there. I just think it needed a little bit more time to be shopped, but they're always in such a rush to get these movies out because they want to capitalize on the hype of the last one. And I'm like, sure, go ahead, do it. It would have been better if you had taken more time, but I'm not the person making them.
So what would be, of the Jamie Lee Curtis Halloween movies, how would you rank like your top 3?
Halloween the original,
Yeah.
Halloween 2018, and then I might go H2O.
Interesting.
Yeah. Again, I like these new movies a lot more.
Yeah.
But if we're just talking about Laurie, I feel like those 3 films kind of give us the most Laurie Strode. Halloween 2, she's in a bed for the majority of the film. So I'm like, it's a great follow-up. It's not as good as the original, but she's in a bed for the most part. Halloween Resurrection, absolutely not. Get that out of here. Halloween Kills, she's also in a bed for most of the time. Halloween Ends, it's not necessarily about her, but the ending is really good. So I think for me, it is the original 2018 and then H2O, because those are the most Laurie-centric movies.
Halloween 1 and 2, well, it's confusing, but the first 2 that came out.
Right. Again, those are kind of one movie, though. Like, those are a double feature.
That's what I was just going to say. I watched it on the weekend as a double feature.
Yep.
And it works so well because obviously it picks up right where it left off. And it does work as a double feature. And there is a bit of a bummer in that one, which is funny that I didn't put that 2 and 2 together, that she spent a lot of time in the hospital in that one and spent a lot of time in hospital in Kills, that I'm like, get her out of the bed. Like, I don't like when they have her sort of like in shock, I'm not doing anything.
Yep.
I think H2O is also, I really like that film. I thought Josh did a great job. A young Michelle Williams, I thought when you're going back and watching that one, again, it was the simplicity of the story. She had a son in that one. That bond was really fleshed out. And they kind of repeated it again in 2018 with how she had sort of messed up. You can't mess up motherhood, but messed it up a little bit because of her trauma, how she passed on all her paranoia to her kids and they didn't take seriously how big a threat he was. But I really liked that story. I liked those characters. And again, so I think that was probably my second favorite. So Halloween, the first Halloween, then that one. And then I guess the 2018 would be my number. So beyond those, if we're talking entire franchise.
Oh, I got you. I got them all ranked on Letterboxd.
Right.
I will not disappoint.
I knew you were gonna have
Oh, hell no. I got you. No.
I was like, I know Adam's gonna have his ranking and I probably should have mine, but I'm just gonna open the floor to you, sir. And you just roll with it.
So if I were to rank the entire franchise, including every single film, top to bottom, it would be John Carpenter's Halloween,
Check.
Halloween 2018, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch.
Oh, yeah.
The non-Michael Myers Halloween movie.
Yeah.
Then I would do Kills and Ends, H2O, Halloween 2, Halloween 4, Rob Zombie's Halloween, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, Halloween The Curse of Michael Myers, which is the 6th film, Halloween 5, which I just rewatched this year. Woof. And then Halloween Resurrection, because uber woof.
Well, Adam, this was such a joy to talk to you about this movie. I hate to tell you this and leave you with this, but Michael's been behind your shoulder the whole time. So with that said,
just where he belongs.
you go contend with him. You got the boogeyman behind you. Thank you so much for joining, and please give yourself a plug and let people know where they can find you. Sure.
Well, thank you for having me. This was so fun. It's so fun to just be able to talk about these movies with anybody. And I was actually like, the thing that I think I liked so much was, there are some things that we definitely agreed on and some things that we would have to kind of meet halfway on. And I love having those conversations. I'm really not interested when people online are like, I just hate this movie and it's not for me and I don't like it. I'm like, that's fair, but I like to have a conversation. So thank you so much for inviting me to talk about this movie and talk about this franchise. You can just find me, Heroes Reforged, on YouTube. And then my social media is just my name, Adam Hlavik. If you want to come at me with any of your Halloween disagreements, please, I'm all for it. Let's go. All right. Well, thank you again for joining. I totally agree that it's fun to sometimes disagree about things. And that's what was great about this movie, is that overall, even though there was some definite issues I had with it, it stayed with me. It has stayed with me. I checked the closets when I got home. I was scared by it, which a lot of horror movies make me laugh, to be quite frank, and they don't scare me. And this one absolutely scared me. And it was entertaining. It was really super entertaining. I never got bored. And I certainly didn't get bored in this conversation. So thank you again for joining. You are a wonderful guest as always. And thank you all for watching. We hope you've enjoyed
this episode of the After Show. Halloween ends, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye.